There's something I've been wondering about for a while now. For months, for years, I've been thinking about why do I like the aesthetics, the visuals, the music of the High Middle Ages, the symbolism, and not just myself, but many other people, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I've interacted with on YouTube, a lot of people seem to fixate not only on the Middle Ages, but specifically the High Middle Ages. Out of all the different time periods, the classical period, the Dark Ages, which are really the early Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the neoclassical, 1700s, 1800s, and on, out of all these time periods, there seems to be a special fixation with the Middle Ages and, again, specifically the High Middle Ages. So, for a while now, I've wanted to make this video and kind of explore some possible reasons for this. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy, and hopefully we can kind of figure it out together. So the first reason that I was thinking that could explain why there is this appeal and attraction to the Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, is that relative to the classical period and also modern times and early modern period, it seems to be a time of simplicity, being closer to nature, having a more simple class system, feudalism, having a higher percentage of the population living in the countryside, so way higher percentage of people were peasants, and that simplicity also leads to romantic ideals and a nostalgia for the natural world, the simple life, right? Like cottagecore. And of course, people are going to avoid the negative aspects of that and focus on the positive ones, but nonetheless, there seems to be almost like an instinct that draws people towards that. Life in the countryside, life closer with nature, a simple class system, a simple religious system, right? Like one religion, not having a lot of variety. There's a strong appeal for that as well. So yeah, I think that definitely plays a role. Nostalgia and escape. Another thing is the mystique and romanticism of that time period. And I don't know what causes it, but in popular culture, we associate the High Middle Ages with romanticized ideals, chivalry, knights, holy knights, Knights Templar, courtly love, all of these things. A lot of poetry from that time period, a lot of literature as well. And I don't know if it's specifically because of the Crusades, but I think that plays a strong role, having this kind of highly idealistic view of the world compared to wars during the classical period in Greece or Rome. They were focused on kind of almost like base instincts of like conquest and material expansion. But then also more recent wars in the modern period are also kind of very materialistic, very very selfish in a way. But then you compare that to at least how they sought to present themselves in the Middle Ages. The ideals were put on a pedestal, and that could have been because of the Catholic Church being very influential. So at the very least, you had to make it seem like you were doing something for a higher reason, even if that wasn't always the case. But yeah, I think people definitely find that appealing as well. Another thing which I think deserves to be mentioned is the role of cultural and popular media in popularizing the High Middle Ages. It seems to be a reoccurring setting in various movies, especially in the 2000s. There were a lot of Hollywood blockbusters that were set during that time period, or set in a fantasy setting which is inspired by it. So, Kingdom of Heaven comes to mind. The humans in the Warcraft universe also come to mind. So it's something that people are introduced to over and over again, and that definitely also plays a big role in it being appealing and drawing people in and making it, one of the most favorite aesthetic styles and choices in terms of time period. Another thing which I think on its own plays a big role is just the beauty and impressiveness of Gothic architecture. Like, if you look at most churches before Gothic cathedrals, and even afterwards, they don't really compare. Like, you know, some like neoclassical churches which came after Gothic, they can look pretty good, but they lack that majesty of just being towering and overly decorative that Gothic cathedrals had. And of course, the ones that came before, you know, they lack the technology of the flying buttress and other things, which were only invented during that time, and I think the 1100s and 1200s. So just the majesty and technological sophistication of Gothic cathedrals, that alone is enough to also draw people into this aesthetic and time period. And last but not least, actually I think this might be one of the main reasons, I think during the High Middle Ages, you know, this was a time when a lot of what we consider to be Europe was created, right? The first universities, the first really sophisticated churches in Western Europe, most of the states that are very familiar to us, like France and England and Spain and so on, they were founded during this time. And just the general identity of the modern West, you know, many people kind of consider it to be the Greco-Roman world, but in terms of moral sensibilities and statehood and languages and many other things, their real earliest roots are much more often during the High Middle Ages rather than during the time of Rome. Even though, you know, there's a lot of LARPing where people like to harken back to Rome because, you know, it has a lot of prestige and it was an imperial power, but in reality, I think it's usually much more tied to the Middle Ages. So, yeah, even though the High Middle Ages, you know, had both positive and negative aspects, I think the aesthetic appeal and cultural legacy of this era continue to capture the imagination of not only me, but also people around the world.